Well, everybody, it is October, which means time for me to finally make a video again. And it's another wonderful collaboration with Michael Maxwell from the Jack of All Nerds show. Podcast, YouTube, website, everything.
Yes, all the things.
Amazing. Links will all be in the description. We did this last year, and it was awesome. It was a nice way to, for me to recap all these seasons. I started reviewing, 14 years ago, I think. And also give me it gives me like a timeline of when these episodes actually aired, because I did them out of order. You're doing them in order, correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah, so it's nice to remember, well, what was actually the first season. You can kind of see how the show evolves. Season 2, which is what we'll be reviewing today, it certainly evolves. To me, it really evolves in a direction of being almost like they start going after more of a teenage demographic. So they start introducing these romantic subplots, and it gets a lot more colorful and a lot less scary, weirdly. What did you think, general impressions?
I think I agree with that, to be honest. I feel like there was less stories that were actively trying to scare you. Not to say that there weren't some scary elements, but yeah. You're right. It was almost like they were trying to focus more on storytelling, which I mean isn't necessarily a bad thing, but I mean as a little kid, I guess you don't really care about storytelling. You just want to be thrilled. But yeah, I agree with you. It felt like the cast overall was older as well. Like you see more older kids in the cast. So I think you're right. I think they were trying to reach that teen demographic.
Yeah, I mean there are full episodes. We'll get into it, but there are full episodes where there is no real villain. There's no real scares. There's no memorable images or moments. I remember all these episodes because I've reviewed them, obviously, but this one had far less. I shouldn't say that entirely. I was going to say generally there's far less memorable moments and memorable episodes this season, but there are a couple that were would rank in my top episodes of all time for Are You Afraid of the Dark. Not necessarily scariest, but ones that stuck with me because they used really strong images or strong unique stories, I think.
Yeah. Well, and that's one thing I was going to comment on is because when we did this last year, one of our rating categories was scares. And as I was going through these episodes, I was like, some of these episodes had good makeup and effects, yeah, but they had no scares. And so I was like, do I factor that in here? Do I not? So it was very weird. It was a weird season.
Yeah, I thought the same with setting. We put setting. Our categories that we're ranking on, similar to last year, will be plot, acting, setting, and scares. And then at the end, we're going to talk about best and worst actors, best and worst villains. But setting, I found almost all these episodes would just take place in a high school. Whereas the first season, we had these really unique and strange and interesting things happening. This time it was just, there's a couple really great standout episodes, but generally it was just a park.
Lot of schools, a lot of cemeteries at night.
Yes, although they did better this season. That's one of my favorite ones. We'll get to that at Old Man Corcoran. Also, stick around to the end. We are going to, at long last, do a prize draw. There's going to be a different system, though. It won't be commenting. It's going to be an actual entry form. So our sincerest apologies to, I believe it was Jessica G, who won the last prize, but we just weren't able to get a hold of you. So, yes, our sincerest apologies.
We tried, for months. We tried.
So if you are Jessica G and you're watching this, click the link in the description that will be there. You enter again, and, it's up for grabs. Maybe you'll win it a second time. So let's jump right in. First episode of the season is The Tale of the Final Wish. What were your general impressions of this?
Well, I think we need to address the elephant in the room with this first season, or the first episode of the second season, is the blatant murder of Eric, who just vanished from the show.
I know.
No one says a word about it. You cannot convince me that they did not kill him and bury him in the forest somewhere.
It should have been involved in a story. That should have been Kiki's way of revealing to the group that she got rid of Eric. And they all end cheering. Yeah, it was deserved.
Yeah. Yeah. Because it's one of those things, the only reason it bothers me so much is because in the next season, when some cast leave, they address it. They're they moved. And nobody says anything.
I know. Just a shuffle. I feel bad for that actor. I haven't looked into what he's doing, but he was a good actor. He's just playing a loathsome character.
That is true. I think he's been on, there's another Canadian series that I haven't seen that he is on as an adult actor. I've heard people talk about it. It's going to bother me. It's going to bother me now that I can't think of it. I'll try to look it up. But he is still doing things, so
I should be cautious then, because I live in a city where a lot films in Canada, and I've run into that. I've run into a few Are You Afraid of the Dark actors where I've had to really what did I say about you? I got in trouble, speaking of, for this episode when I reviewed it, for not knowing who Bobcat Goldthwait was, and knowing nothing about the man and seeing this episode, I was like, this is an insane casting choice. The voice he does, the character he puts on is terrible. But upon second viewing, I'm like, oh, it's Bobcat Goldthwait. This is like the character this actor does, this comedian does. Comedian, voice actor? I'm still not entirely sure, but I got ripped to shreds in the comments when I reviewed this.
Oh, yeah. It's... by the way, Letterkenny is the name of the series.
Oh, yeah. It shoots out east, but yes. Popular show.
Eric is in, so yes. He's still, in real life, he's alive and well.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't remember when I was a kid if I had known who Bobcat was. I mean, I was familiar with things like Police Academy and a lot of the stuff he had done, but I don't know where my viewings fell with these.
Yeah.
But as an adult rewatching it, very aware of who Bobcat was, and when he pops out, it flat out ruins the episode for me.
I wrote the same thing.
Hi there!
It's so baffling, and I guess if you're looking at it from it's so bad it's funny, then right. It's great. It's a great episode, but I felt like they were really getting there with the just the ambiance of the episode, and the whole story I thought was really good. And then you get to 7 minutes into this episode and hi there, and you're like, oh my God, what is happening?
It's a really good impression. He pops out and immediately sets the tone as goofy, and he kind of sets the tone for the entire season, I think, because it really you're right. They set up, there's a couple moments, I think the brothers sleepwalking, there's some moments that are a little jarring and kind of bizarre and interesting. And then as soon as they go into the dream world and he's involved and he's using that trademark kind of voice, he's also just not really committing. I mean, he's on a kid's show, so it's this half realm of it's almost like he's reading his lines off a cue card. It just has a really bizarre cadence, but he really kind of ruins the episode for me, I think.
The strangest things are there for me, both things to eat and things to see, and many frightening sights abroad, till morning in the land of Nod.
What's funny is when I'm picturing it, right? I'm imagining this story being told at this campfire by Kristen, and and when she's describing it, how do you she's and then out from under the bed, the Sandman appears with a voice that sounds like someone has stepped on a man's nuts. What? How do you describe that to people?
Yeah. Sounds like squeaking rubber.
Yes.
So what did you give this in terms of plot?
I actually think the plot was pretty good for the most part. I liked where the story was going. Honestly, the main thing that kills the story for me is the character of the Sandman. But the, getting trapped in your dreams, classic, Nightmare on Elm Street type of a thing. It's a classic kind of horror trope. So I thought that was good. I gave it a 7 out of 10.
Oh, I gave it a 4. I agree with you. I just think that it is pretty well-worn territory, like you said. It doesn't really introduce anything new. I like the idea of the fairy tale characters being, I guess, the villains, but they show up for a second and then disappear. Yeah. And so you never feel like there's this threat of her not escaping. I don't know. It felt, and I think the ending is insane. I thought the ending was really lame with the book. I don't know, bringing him back for one last line is just ugh.
Yeah, and I mentioned in my review that some episodes in Are You Afraid of the Dark go for the twist ending, and while this does that, it doesn't feel earned at all. You know what I mean? It feels weird, and you almost can't understand what he's saying at the end either.
Yeah, totally agree. How about acting?
See, so there's a couple episodes this season where I'm split on the acting, because I feel like half the acting is great, and then there's Bobcat.
Yep.
So I gave it an 8, but honestly, that was really the lead doing the heavy lifting. I thought that little girl was phenomenal. Like when she had the tears in her eyes, just pleading because she wants to go home. Like she was phenomenal. And then
I know. I agree. I think she was really great. Wasn't crazy about the brother. Wasn't crazy about the parents, although they were salvageable. I just think there's better parent performances this season. But Bobcat was pretty bad. I gave it a 6. This is another one where the setting to me, it's fine. The dream world I actually thought was pretty good. I like it looks, it sets up the season as being a little bit higher budget, which I think it clearly is, given some of the effects. Yeah, than last season?
I thought the dream world looked terrible.
I mean, it looks like a theater production, but like the bodies floating and stuff, like it does like, I guess I'm imagining it more like the Zebo haunted house sequence kind of thing, where it's very clearly like painted flats and things. So I thought it was like effective. I still gave the setting a 5 because there's nothing like memorable about it.
I think part of it was the music. I remember commenting on that in my video that like the music was bothersome for me. Like I thought like because you're right, the floating people and like the heavy use of fog machines, it goes a long way. And I just thought like if there was more like silence and like just there's so many clocks everywhere. Like if you just heard like the constant ticking of the clocks, like how unnerving that would be. But instead you got like this like goofy music going on. Yeah. And I felt like that I think that impacted my feelings on the setting, because I gave the setting a 4.
Yeah. You can cover anything with fog. Any bad effects, just more fog. That comes up a few times, actually, too, I'm remembering now. Scares, I gave a 1. I literally can think of one moment that I thought was kind of unnerving, and that was the brothers' weird sleepwalking kind of thing. But outside of that, truly, there was nothing even memorable. I guess the appearance of the fairy tale villains was kind of interesting, and like the costuming was effective, but yeah, 1.
I gave it a 3. And again, I just think that when the episode started, there was more atmosphere. Like when, you're right, the brother is a good kind of jump scare moment. When she wakes up and she can't find her parents, and there's that, she comes to the top of the staircase and she's looking down on just the empty house and it's just completely dark. And I was like, this is good. This is, we're building up to something. And then obviously, I mean, don't get me wrong. The episode gets scary, but for the wrong reasons.
Yeah, exactly right. That gave me an average of 4 out of 10, which I believe is not great.
No, I'm not that far off. My average was 5.5.
Okay. The best moment in this, I did like a lamest moment, best moment in these episodes. Did you do something similar?
I did not, but
that's totally fine.
I can easily think of those moments for sure.
I mean, the thing is, honestly, nothing really sticks out in this episode to me. So if there was a super lame moment or a best moment, I guess we can just mention that. I hated the fairy tale, scary tale joke. And I think they do it 3 times between the Midnight Society stuff at the campfire and within the story. Fairy tale, I can't even say it. Fairy tale, scary tale.
I'm not buying it. A kiddie story is a kiddie story, no matter how you cut it.
Ugh. Who wrote this? Like, it's rough.
Was it? I don't know if it's a lame moment, but talking about dating an episode, the troll doll that was in her backpack.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense. She's got some pretty weak villains at the school too, if I remember correctly. The like Mean Girls.
Mean Girls, yeah. Oh my god. Her crush though. This kid who is wearing jeans, a tucked in button down shirt with a tie, and a backwards baseball hat.
Never seen you looking so lovely as you did tonight.
The 90s.
Coolest. Yeah, he would date a girl with a troll doll. But I mean, this is also the first of many where they all of a sudden introduce a romantic subplot, which I don't have the first season notes in front of me, but like, I don't think there was much of any of that. Was there?
I don't think there was. I think maybe prom queen, but I mean, that wasn't like a romantic subplot. That was just, they reunited like the ghosts.
Brothers and sisters and best friends and like going on adventures. And this
Yeah.
one is a lot more like high school drama. The goal is always a love interest. It's very
Yeah.
strange.
No, you're right. It comes up a lot this season for sure.
Good to move on to Midnight Madness.
Yes.
So this
if memory serves, you are not a fan of Dr. Vink, right? Is that?
I'm more a fan of Dr. Vink than I am of Sardo, but
Okay.
I'm not crazy about any of the recurring characters in these. And I don't know why. I get them, but I think I don't buy into the idea that in an episode, as soon as they give them these huge entrances where it's like they're expecting the audience to be like, yes, it's a Dr. Vink episode. And it just feels like unearned. He's not scary. They're always whimsical. Those episodes in particular, anytime I see that Sardo's in it, I'm typically like a little checked out because I know what it's going to be. It's a magic trick gone wrong every time. And Dr. Vink is like a science experiment gone wrong pretty much every time. Although this episode is not. So I'm already proving myself wrong.
I think they both have their moments. I appreciate them both on the cheese factor. Like how over the top both actors bring those characters.
They're both
to life.
great, I should say. I like the actors.
Yeah, but they don't always bring anything to this story. In fact, I want to say Sardo brings less to his stories than Dr. Vink does typically.
So they're both plot devices. They're both just like plot devices, so they don't need to come up with a good explanation. It's just like, well, it's Sardo. He sells something, it goes wrong, don't worry about it. Yeah. But it's like there never needs to be an explanation of like, where did this come from? Why is it magic? Anything like that. The Tale of the Midnight Madness was new to me when I reviewed it for the first time. I don't think I'd ever seen this episode as a kid. I really love it. And I liked it when I reviewed it the first time too. It has some of the like most striking visuals. I think there's like genuinely really scary moments. It's a slow burn. It takes a while to get to the like scary sequences, but the last like 5-10 minutes of this, I think are some of the strongest moments in Are You Afraid of the Dark?
I agree to some extent. I do think there are very striking moments, and I think the vampire looks really good.
Yeah.
When it's in black and white. When it comes into the real world, when they get some close-up shots on it, I'm like, oh, that looks a little janky. Let's back off of that. But overall, I agree. This is actually one of my favorite episodes from this season.
I agree with you. I wish they'd had the capacity at the time to do kind of like, almost like the Ring effect when she leaves the TV, where it still has that kind of static, glowing kind of thing to it. I think that would really change, because you're right. It looks like a bald cap and makeup. Like it looks like theater makeup up close. But I still find him creepy. As a villain, I find him really creepy, and I think that's what works for me. I also think the acting is super strong in this. So I of both of the leads, I think they're really good. I hate their boss, but like he functions as a good counterpoint to Dr. Vink, and they have these insane scenes together.
What's your angle, pal?
Overall plot, what did you think?
Again, when you're talking about Vink, it feels like it's just a weird plot device to, like, there was definitely a different way they could have made this happen. Like, because I'm a writer, I do tend to think about things like that. Like, if they were in this struggling theater and, you know, the main characters are tasked with going down and cleaning out like a basement or something like that, and they've just happened to find some old film reels, and they pop it in, and suddenly it starts getting successful, but then it ends up leading to like the reels are alive or something like that. You know what I mean? Like the vampire can come out. You could have easily accomplished that without the character of Dr. Vink, but
yes, totally agree.
But as it stands, I do think it was a pretty good story overall. I think I gave it an 8 for plot. So
nice. I gave it a 7. And I don't exactly know why, because I did really like the plot. It is pretty unique. I think it plods along a little bit. Like you said, there isn't a need for Dr. Vink to have this like antagonistic relationship with the boss. They spend a lot of the episode debating the merits of what to play and the old lady loving the movie. It's just like a lot that is just like, they could have trimmed the fat in this episode and gotten to the chase stuff quicker.
Can we talk about the reusing drink cups and popcorn cups?
It's so sad. The thing is, I know those theaters coming from like rural Alberta. I know that place. Like, not that they would do that, but no.
Oh yeah. Plus that lady was just so like when she leaves the theater the first time and she's just so rude.
Yeah.
I was like, what? The usher didn't do anything to you. What are you taking it out on him for?
Enjoy the film, man?
Yeah, I know. As though they're making the movies. It has this attitude of like, oh God, you really produced another stinker here. I really like the acting, as I said. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, but speaking of romantic interests, this is an episode that does that.
It is,
and
I don't mind this though, and I think the actors pull it off. They're of an age and of like a maturity in this where they're not like, maybe it's just because they're not in the school setting. They have jobs. So to me, I'm already like, it's not super heavy-handed, but it's an intro. It adds stakes, I guess, so that when the villain appears, we understand why they want to survive this together. They pull for each other. It gives him this moment to be brave and go do this thing. And I don't know. For some reason, it really didn't bother me in this episode. I think it added. I mean,
it does work in the narrative, but because I watched it, for my review with jaded adult eyes, all I could see was how when he first asked her out, she was like, oh, I got to study. But then like the moment he's like saving the theater, she's like, hey, we should hang out. And it's like, okay, Katie, I see where you're at.
I did like both of them though. And I think they carry the episode equally. I gave it an 8 out of 10 only because the boss is pretty atrocious. I get why he's there. I don't really blame the actor, but the character, I do blame the actor. His delivery is wild, but I don't doubt he was directed into it. So it is this like, it doesn't fit with the rest of the episode, but he has to match Vink's insane energy.
Yeah.
So it just becomes this battle of like, I think when I reviewed it, I called it some kind of like, they're like teaching a lecture on hammy children's TV show acting, because it's a lot.
Perfect. Absolutely perfect.
I mean, it is over the top, but I agree with you. I think it has to be for the episode.
Yes.
Plus, but when you're judging the acting too, it's like, yeah, it is over the top, but it does exactly what it's intended to. You do not like this man. In fact, when he is revealed to be alive at the end, I was like, ah, like I was disappointed.
Would have been a nice byproduct of this attack. I really love the setting. This is one of my top 2 of the season for sure, where I think the theater's really cool and all the back rooms and stuff. Like, it's creepy. It's of a good era where this is all believable. The whole Nosferatu thing kind of fits. I gave it a 9 out of 10.
Okay. I gave it an 8. I agree with you. I think the setting is very good. Even like what I really applaud, and you could consider this part of the setting because, it's the old movie, basically their homage to Nosferatu is done so incredibly well.
Yeah.
Like that alone just makes this episode stand out among the other episodes. Like it's just done so well.
Yeah. And it also like, it is. And we know immediately with the references, and it's rare for Are You Afraid of the Dark to kind of reference something so directly and so recognizable that is, carries like artistic merit. Like it's recognizable to horror fans generally. They're not just creating this whole new monster out of somewhere. This is someone that like we know, and they pull it off really well, I think. The scares, as I mentioned, it's interesting. There's not like a huge amount of jump scares in this, but there's the last 10 minutes, the sequence once he gets out of the screen, I think is so effective. I gave it a 7 out of 10 just because there's really no like one moment I can boil it down to that I thought was really, really scary. But a couple really good moments and really creepy visuals. I like the effects on him when he, what's his name? Pete, enters the screen. I thought was really, really well done.
Yeah, I gave it a 5 on the scares. While I agree with you about like the tension at the end, yeah, it was just, for me, once the vampire comes out of the screen and just the look of it, I thought cheapened it a little bit for me. But when they're not focusing on the vampire, like once it's in the real world and there's other things going on around it, I agree. I think the tension is really good across the board in this episode. With again, I enjoy Dr. Vink for his over the topness, but like he doesn't. What does he do? You know what I mean? Like,
I know. Besides being, I guess, just like a comforting character to return to, or maybe it's to tie all the seasons together. I'm not even sure. Because is it always the same storyteller that uses Dr. Vink? I believe Gary always uses Sardo.
Yeah, it's Frank, isn't it? I think Frank is Dr. Vink is Frank's creation. So yeah.
Oh, you're right. Because he was Midnight Madness, and that was the very first. No, that's this story. What am I talking about? What was the very, very first one?
The cab, the
Phantom Cab. Yeah, and that was Frank as well. You're right. Yeah. So that gives me a 7.75 out of 10 as an average.
That gives me a 7.25 average.
Yeah, I mean, let's skip the lamest moment, best moment stuff, because none of it I was like really sticking. I was really struggling to find it. I don't know. I created my own rubric and then hated it. But
well, I mean, there is a pretty lame. I mean, because again, it's all going into that like having to manufacture things around Vink, but like the whole idea of the manager.
Yeah.
Like when Vink makes the offer, right? And at first he's like, I'm not going to do it, but then Pete does it anyway. And then the theater's successful. And then Vink's like, hey, it's successful. So live up to your end and just let me once a week, I just want to air a movie. And it's like, and the manager's like, nah, I'm not going to do that, pal. And it's like, but the theaters now say, if his one movie made your theater this successful, why wouldn't you want him to try out other movies? Like, it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, it's such a good point, because I wrote lamest moment. I'm just not crazy about the boss, but you're right. That could have been written differently. I like the idea you mentioned earlier about if they found these reels in the basement, it could have given us an opportunity to solve the problem in a different way too, where like we're able to, like in oh God, I keep trying to remember these episode titles now. What was the one with the pool where they discover the pool? Dead Man's Float.
Oh yeah,
that's coming up in a future season. It's like this scary thing is happening, and then only till the end of the episode do we realize why it's happening, and we have to go back in time, and maybe there's a flashback that explains like every 100 years this happens, or every time this is played, and this is how you defeat it, that kind of thing. But yeah, introducing the boss and it's so contrived and so like, again, I think it's just because Dr. Vink also doesn't fit in this. His whole thing is being like this wild scientist experimenting guy who's like always whimsical, never really the villain, but like creates a villain in some way.
What do movies have to do with science experiments? You know, and
right.
And I get like they try to like, oh, I'm experimenting by having people watch the movies, but it's like, it's not really what you do.
If anything, Sardo would have been a better fit for this role, to be like a traveling salesman who has these magic films that whatever, like, or he doesn't even realize what they do, but he's been tasked with selling them to a theater. I don't even know. But yeah, it just didn't quite fit. It was a little mismatched.
Yeah. Real quick before we move on, because it will become relevant this season, but the actor who played Nosferatu in this, Christopher Heyerdahl, I'm not really sure if I'm pronouncing his last name correctly, but he is like a regular in Are You Afraid of the Dark? In fact, he plays a character in another episode this season. So, but he does a great job. So
I'll have to try and guess. If I don't get there by the end of that episode that we're reviewing. Okay. Interesting. Playing another villain, I assume?
Sort of.
Okay. Good to move on?
Oh, yeah, let's do it.
Nice. So the Tale of Locker 22.
Is it the least scary episode of the season?
Least scary episode of Are You Afraid of the Dark ever? This was wild. And I reviewed this and I don't remember being this disappointed in it, but watching it this time, man, it's bad.
I think I may have been a little too generous in areas on this episode, because the story itself, I think, is pretty good. And the acting is pretty good as well. It's not great, but it's not bad. But I feel like everything else holds it back to me. Like there's no scares in this episode whatsoever. The setting is garbage. Like the high school that they made it look like an alley in New York. Like, why is there so much graffiti in this high school?
I know, on the lockers. Did you read too? It pans by, and one of the lockers just says AIDS on it. Yeah. It's the strangest thing, but it's like, I don't know what the set deck department was thinking with this high school, but it's all so bright and grungy at the same time. And yeah, the way they play the era, the way they play the flashbacks of the 70s, I get it. You have to differentiate. You have to make modern day actors. It's a hard era to represent unless you're showing cars and unless you're allowed to play music. Like, it's hard, especially this is the 90s, so it's like not that far off for an era, but it's like they transported to Woodstock. Like the students are stoned all of a sudden.
Yeah, the
It's
kid
so
that doesn't
strange.
even have his eyes open.
No, he's like, peace, man, peace.
Whoa. Be cool.
Gee, what? They were just behaving that way in the 70s. It's because they were doing drugs. Like, what?
Yeah. And
Very
it's
bizarre.
funny to think about because I guarantee you, because I don't remember this episode from when I was a kid, but I probably wouldn't have had an issue with it because as a kid, you do need those. They need to like ham fist you with context clues sometimes. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Whereas as an adult, you're watching this and you're like, wow, that is just blatantly wrong. It's not. Those kids are all high.
It's infuriating. And like, I know very little about the 70s, but I know enough to be like, oh, all right, this is like the carnival version of the 70s. It's also Kristen's second opportunity in only 3 episodes to dress up to tell her story, which, I mean, she is who she is. I will say it's got to be the least scary episode of all time. There is no villain. They present this teacher, like, 'cause he's not even in, like, he's the villain because he has to be. There is no other villain. There's a ghost who you don't even know is a ghost because she's that not scary. And the villain doesn't even know. He's an unwitting villain. He, by mistake and through being a mean/ignorant teacher, put a student in danger. But immediately upon recognizing it, is like hugely regretful and is like, oh no, I did this. And then the episode ends. Like, I was just waiting for something to happen.
Yeah. It's also one of those because anytime you deal with time travel, right, things get wonky.
Yeah.
And this, when you find out that it was him that was responsible, then you're like, how is this man the vice principal in the modern day if he accidentally killed a child?
Well, but isn't that why? So when they go back in time, they correct the error, they get her out, and then when they flash forward in time, she's still alive and is the principal now, correct?
Yeah, she's now the vice principal or whatever. Shopner? What was his name? Whatever that teacher's name was.
Yeah.
She is now his position. But
so I assume
again,
it just wasn't found out when he was like when he got away with it. I guess he didn't know
Schaffner.
It was his fault.
Schaffner is his name,
right?
Yeah, but it's just a weird thing. Is it's like, so you let him be the vice principal when he did kill a child, but then when he didn't, now he doesn't work there anymore. Like,
well, he felt so guilty when he realized that he quit because he couldn't handle the responsibility of being a science teacher. I gave the plot a 4 out of 10. I agree with you. It's well constructed. I just don't. It doesn't fit with Are You Afraid of the Dark? It doesn't make sense as a plot for this show.
And I think you're onto the right thing that it's the twist that he's an accidental villain, I think is what kills it, because up to that point when they first go back in time and he's there and he's like, I want to see you after school or whatever to make up that time, you're like, wait a minute. All right. So you start piecing it together yourself and you're like, did this guy kill this kid?
Yeah.
Like, you're thinking like he's a villain, and that's a great twist, but somebody somewhere in television was like, no, you can't have this teacher kill this child. Like, that's probably what it boiled down to. But yeah, once the realization that it's all an accident, you're just kind of like, okay.
Yeah. I mean, I like that better. I like the idea that he's this like psycho teacher who turned principal and they hate him in the modern day, but don't know that he has this crazy past. But that gets far too dark for the show, right? So they clearly landed on the side of like, well, we'll keep it light and nostalgic for kids who have no idea what this era meant.
Well, and they might have been afraid of retreading the Sorcerer's Apprentice. That they might have been like worried about kind of retreading that same vibe. So
totally, yeah. I agree with you though. The acting is really good. I like the lead girl. The lead guy's not my favorite, but like he's salvageable. And I actually think the teachers were both great. So I give it a 6 out of 10.
Yeah. Although I do think that I'm sorry, I'm mixing up characters now from there's so many school episodes, I'm mixing up characters. Yeah, I do think the acting was really good. Candy? Is that
Candy's the ghost, correct?
Candy's the ghost.
Yeah.
So that actress, I think, was like 18 or something at the time. And I've seen people like make posts about her, how like she's believable as a kid, but not as an adult. I actually found that the reverse, because the first time she showed up, I was like, who is this 30-year-old pretending to be a dead teenager? I legitimately thought she was way older than she was. And then I looked it up and I was like, oh no, she was only like 18, but I thought she was a more convincing adult than a kid, but maybe that's just me.
I am surprised she's 18. She looks older than that, but I think she still looked young. Yeah, I mean, it was the 70s. Everyone was all different ages at school, as it turns out. The setting and the scares, man. I gave the setting a 2, and I gave the scares a 0. The setting I only gave a 2 because at least they, like, attempted to differentiate the eras. They set-decked the hell out of the school with spray paint. But the scares, there's just nothing there. I think it's the only 0 I gave this whole season, but man, bad.
I've never gone as low as a 0, although if I was going to go that low, this would be the episode for it, because I gave the scares a 1, because there's just, yeah, you're right, there's nothing scary in this episode at all.
Both of you, my office, now!
Even the moments where they tried to, where like the ghost shows up in the background kind of a thing, like she's never really that scary, so... No. And settings, I gave a 3, and I don't know if I covered plot and acting. I gave a 7 to both. So my average for this episode, I think, ended up being maybe higher than it should because of those elements, but it ended up being a 5 overall.
I got a 3 overall. This was
you have a 0 in there.
I know, this is not a favorite of mine. I feel bad in a way because I do think the actors are good, and I think they just got put in a really poorly conceived show for Are You Afraid of the Dark.
It's not a bad, because that's one of the things too about this series, that when you think Are You Afraid of the Dark, you think scary, like that's what it's supposed to be, scary for kids. But when you hear interviews with the creator, it was really meant to be like Twilight Zone for kids. Like it's all inspired. Right. And Twilight Zone had a lot of episodes that weren't necessarily scary, but they had the wacky science fiction-y twists on it. And this would be one of those episodes for sure. So, but it's just like you think Are You Afraid of the Dark, and you think it should be scary, and this just wasn't. So I don't think it's a bad episode necessarily. I think it's just, it feels wrong for the series, which
I think
it's basically what you said, I think.
No, I think that's totally right. It's interesting because I always saw Are You Afraid of the Dark as the like scarier, slightly more mature version of Goosebumps. And this is certainly more mature, and I don't know where else it would fit, because it is like, I get it. There's a ghost involved, there's a death involved. It's adults, but it's not, there's just, I like associate Are You Afraid of the Dark with these memorable visuals of the doll coming out of the closet, and of the pool monster in Dead Man's Float, and of these like really like memorable, horrifying things that were like just pushing the limits of what you could put in a kid's show. And this one is just so not memorable. There's nothing, it is like the most bland things from every episode. A high school, a kind of romantic subplot, adult actors, a bright setting, like it's just everything that is just like you wish wasn't in an Are You Afraid of the Dark episode, all squeezed into one. Not my
Adam, there's an aggressive food fight. What more could you ask for?
Right. You know what? I take it all back. Good to move on?
Yeah.
So the Tale of the 13th Floor is next. This episode, maybe more than any other, stuck with me as a kid. I remember this episode so distinctly. Not only the visuals, but the plot. There was one scene in this this episode that I like associate so clearly with Are You Afraid of the Dark, and just it really haunted me as a kid. We'll talk more about it when we get there. But what are your like general impressions of 13th Floor?
This episode is one that I think has a lot of really, really strong elements to it. And then there's also some really weak elements to it that make for a little bit of a mixed bag for me, but overall I enjoyed this. So I don't want anyone to be coming at me. But
well, it's one of those,
overall I enjoyed this.
I don't think I'm alone in saying that it's like one of those episodes that sticks out. I think people remember the Tale of the 13th Floor. The concept of it being this like toy factory in an apartment building, I think was something that as kids was like wild and not like not realistic, but it was like, I guess, kind of almost relatable in a way, rather than, you know, even like a haunted graveyard or a haunted whatever. This was something that was like, I don't know. Something about it to me was so like immediate and so close, and so, like the ones where there's like something happening in your basement. I find that much scarier than the stuff that's like really out there fantasy wise. This was like a floor above your apartment. That whole concept.
Right,
kind of
right. Well, yeah, because like a cemetery, just don't go there. You know what I mean?
Right, exactly. Yeah. There was also, so we were just talking very briefly before, but I normally hate bright episodes. There's nothing like less scary to me about a bright episode. But because of the nature of what this is, it is a like creepy toy factory that's meant to be a little bit unsettling. There aren't real toys. Everything's just like like one color painted pastel something. And the villains are so eerie in it that I don't know. Something about the colorful kind of brightness of the setting worked for me. It made it a little bit more unnerving, and it made it a little bit more like, okay, just foreign, I guess.
Yeah, for me, it was definitely, I think, intentional, because to me, I thought they were trying to mirror the vibe of those like 50s, 60s sort of alien movies, like the sets and stuff like that. And I felt like they actually nailed that. For me, I didn't like how one note it was, because to me as a child, if I had wandered up to a toy factory and walked in and everything was painted like Easter, I would be like, I'm out.
Yeah. But that's exactly it, right? It is like what you imagine it to be as a kid, being like, sweet, I gotta go test toys. And then you show up and it's this very bizarre looking, no doors. There's something really kind of eerie about it that I think I really liked, in that it was unsettling, and it was not quite what you wanted. They even show up, and like I said, there's no real toys. They're all just there, like she's kind of waiting to see, like, well, I'm being strapped into this machine, and there's this weird memory game, and none of it is like what you might have expected, I guess. It's also, plot-wise, incredibly dark. I forgot how much before you know what the twist is at the very end, they're preying on this adopted kid, and there's this element of the insecurities she feels through being adopted and the kind of like otherness that she feels. Mm. And then the way they like pit her against her brother and they weaken her brother, that's the scene. So the moment that always stuck with me is them turning that dial and making him weak and tired and lose his memory and stuff. Because it's this like non-specific thing they're doing. They're kind of torturing him, but not in a really like specific way. And like to see her finally have confidence after they start to mess with her brother. I don't know. Maybe it's just like having sisters. I found something like incredibly dark about that.
I don't fully agree. I do think it is somewhat dark, but like when you do get the twist reveal at the end, to me that really doesn't make a lot of sense. Because like did his parents just find this baby alien in the hallway?
Yeah, no. The twist doesn't fully make sense, but I do like it. I think it's like, I appreciate that ending because I found it kind of scary. I like to like push into the brother and then the reveal of the sister is the alien. I thought was like, they leave it until the last second, which they rarely do in Are You Afraid of the Dark? Hands
down, one of the best twist endings, because and mainly because of the fact that they did it all in camera.
Yes.
Like that's, I think I spent way too much time talking about how much I appreciated that in my review video for it, but it's brilliant. She's there.
Yeah.
They close in, and obviously she ducked out, and whoever was wearing the other thing pops in. They pull back, and she's there. It's like, it's such a great reveal.
Well, I think part of it too is our constant lowering of our expectations for Are You Afraid of the Dark as adults. But so we're not. I was like, normally in like, if I saw a movie or a TV show nowadays, and they push in on a character sitting next to them, I was like, okay, well, something's going on. But yeah, it actually took me by surprise, and I've seen this episode plenty, and even this time I was still like, oh right, she's an alien. I gave the plot a 10 out of 10. I believe in using the full scale, obviously, as I gave a 0 to our last episode. I gave the plot a 10 out of 10. I think it's original, I think it's well executed, and I really think the twist is super effective. I wrote in here, I forget it every time, which is like wild. I'm 34, I should know better, but I really think it works in this.
I give it an 8. I mean, I do think it's a good plot. I think I just gave it those deductions because, again, once it got to the end and it was the reveal, I started, and again, my child mind would not think about this, but my adult brain was like, that makes no sense. How is this alien child left with these people? Like, how did they find her? How did they adopt her? How did she acclimate to human society? Like, what?
Yeah.
So many questions.
Why does she, the second that she hears she's an alien, turn into an alien? She, like, all of a sudden her mask is gone for no reason. Anyways, no, I agree. I thought the acting was good. I think no one really stands out as being exceptionally good. I think the kids are great. The villains are all hugely over the top, including the elevator attendant. Like, but that works for me because it's like, it still works within the realm of Are You Afraid of the Dark? They're weird. They're not scary. They're bizarre. Yeah,
the flock of seagulls, as I was calling them. They looked like an 80s new wave band. Like, I don't know where the design came from for them, but I think all of the actors did a great job because they're particularly quirky.
Yeah.
And actually the actor who plays Raymond, I gave him like my biggest props for the episode because not only does he have to be weird like everyone else is being weird, but then when you find out that he's also a robot,
yeah,
he had those extra like robotic mannerisms to everything, and I was like, this guy's he's doing it, he's putting in the work, and I really appreciated that. So,
Raymond was the elevator attendant, correct?
No, that's Leonid. Raymond was Raymond's the one that pulls off his face, and then he's the one that keeps getting controlled by the Tiger handheld game.
Yeah, right. I appreciated the elevator attendant, I was going to say, because even though that was hugely over the top, he starts to, again, the dark kind of nature of this episode, starts to like appeal to her as she's trying to run away at the last second in this like soft kind of villainous way of just like,
yeah.
Well, you'll be fine with us, and come on. Like, it's much eerier and like an unexpected choice. Again, to see like villains have strategies in this, it just shows them operating on a different level that isn't just like, we have to kill this girl or we have to do this thing. It is like, it's more complex than these episodes tend to be, I think.
Well, and it does lend itself to the twist because you know, up until you find out what the twist is, it seems like they're just trying to kidnap this girl to take back to their alien planet or whatever. And so, then when the twist happens and you're like, oh, they weren't bad. They were just trying to, they just wanted to give her a hug, you know? Like,
right. And that works with them being weird and not scary, right? They wouldn't be trying to scare her. They're trying to bring her in.
They're just irritated because of the brother. Like that was the wrench in the plan.
That's where
that
the
they
darkness
didn't account
comes
for.
in. Right.
Yeah.
I gave the acting a 7.
Okay. I gave it an 8 on this one. I think we're both in a similar place as far as the kids were great. I don't think anyone in this episode really stands out as weak in any way.
No, I think they're all fine.
I think there's a couple of recurring actors in this episode. One is the initial, not Leonid, but the initial elevator attendant.
Yep.
Gus is the mailman from the Nightly Neighbors.
That's right. Totally. Yeah, with the Band-Aid on his neck.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I made a joke because I was like, I like to imagine that he survived the vampire scare only to come here and work in this elevator and then be murdered by aliens. Like that's,
right. Do they ever explain what happens to him? Presumably he's murdered.
Yeah, he just disappears entirely. Leonid definitely strangled him to death. I think that's what happened.
The setting, I think we may disagree on here. I gave it an 8. Like I said, I'm not normally into these kind of bright sets, but it just works to make it all a bit more horrifying. I find the plot so kind of unsettling that to put it in a bright, happy, and really almost monochromatic kind of atmosphere. It makes the characters all pop a little bit and just makes it seem like they're entering this really, even though it's in their apartment building, this really kind of foreign world.
Yeah. I gave it a 3 on the setting. Again, it did nothing for me. Yeah. I would have liked to have seen, like, I was fine with the initial shots being all like bright pastels and stuff like that, but when they got into like the testing room, if there would have been more, I don't know, like cold metal and stuff like that to kind of mirror, I guess, what I imagine a spaceship to be. Like, yeah. Even though it's not, like, the spaceship is not the apartment, I don't know. I felt like there should have been a little bit of delineation between those spaces, because everything just felt really, I don't know, almost cartoony to me. So
yeah, it definitely was. My guess is the intent was to kind of play against the kind of drabness of the apartment. Even when they're playing hockey up top before the toy company moves in, the difference between that rundown thing and then how quickly this very bright, very clean, very like streamlined kind of space comes together. And I think it's just meant to look alien, would be my guess. But yeah, I get it. I think it's tapping into something like a much deeper childhood fear when I first saw this episode that I can't let go of. So I probably have an unnecessary attachment to these visuals. The scares, I gave an 8 out of 10. There's nothing super scary. The human mask thing I really liked. The first time they do the mask reveal that they're not humans, I think is really well done. And her reveal, the twist, I think is really good. Nothing's like jump scary, but I find it disturbing. And I find the idea of it all to be unsettling.
Yeah, I agree. The face pull, the first time that happens, it's such a great reveal.
Yeah.
I wish that we would have actually had more of those characters, because then there's also when she's being pulled up into the thing and there's like the whole circle of Rita Repulsa's putties there. And
I wrote exactly the same thing. I said the putty creatures are my least favorite part of this episode.
But like those, like, the having no faces, I think really goes a long way. And if we would have had more of them pursuing her rather than Raymond in Raymond face, like in human face, I think that would have added a little bit more to the creep factor. But plus also, and I try not to like let this affect my opinion of the show, because I know they're working with a limited budget, but like this episode, really, you can really feel it, because again, you've got like bowling pins and bicycles painted solid colors to look like toys. When she's in that hallway and Raymond's chasing her and she's using her powers, and it's literally just like
cardboard, styrofoam
or whatever it is. That's like, guys, come on now. Yeah. So I think, what did I give this for? Yeah, I gave the scares a 5. There's nothing to me that was like really scary, but it had some really good moments. Again, that first reveal and then her reveal at the end, just and it's at the end of the episode. It's such a strong statement right at the end. So regardless of how you feel about anything else in the episode, it ends with that. And you're like, that was a great episode, you know?
Yeah, because it's earned. Unlike the twists, unlike, the Sandman or whatever from the first Bobcat Goldthwait's voiceover coming in to be like, but actually she's still there. It's like not this Deus Ex Machina end where it's just like nothing is warranted. This one has like, oh, right. And you're remembering the episode and being like, right, that's why the elevator attendant was so kind to her. And that's why, it all pieces together, and her being adopted and her, like, all of these things start to make more sense through the twist. So yeah, I agree. That gives me an 8.25 average, which I honestly, I think I'm inflating my scores because I just like this episode so much, but like on the metrics we're measuring it by, probably shouldn't be that high, but I really liked it.
My average ended up being a 6. My rating of the scares and the setting really lowered it, but yeah, I think the plot and the acting really hold this episode up for me. And since I feel like we're getting to the end of the discussion here, this is the episode. Old Nosferatu.
Who is it?
Is Leonid, the elevator attendant.
Really?
Yep.
Really? Oh, wild. I was trying to think of like some wiry villain or something, because he seems so like gaunt as Nosferatu.
I mean, I think the shoulder pads really go a long way for his costume.
They bulk him up a bit.
But yeah, that's him. So,
good to move on to Dream Machine.
Oh, the old Dream Machine. We're gonna have some words about this one.
Yeah.
Yes, I am okay to move on.
The Tale of the Dream Machine, it's another one that I like the idea of conceptually, but the execution of it is just not at all scary. It's another one to me that I just am like, it could have gone somewhere, but the way that they did it catered way too much to this romantic plot line and not at all to the like 9 and 10-year-olds who don't care about the romantic plot line and want to not be able to sleep at night. What were your general thoughts?
The more you think about that romantic plot line, the creepier it is.
Oh, 100%. Yes, 100%.
There's nothing okay about it.
No, I think I called it the Tale of the Wet Dream Machine when I first reviewed this episode because it is dark.
Oh, that's so accurate. But this one is it's a real mixed bag for me. I don't really care for this episode on the whole. I do think that the plot is good. I mean, I think it's one that I've seen before somewhere else as well. It is not executed well at all. I also think the acting in this episode is pretty appalling across the board. Which is weird because they're like teens. Like I don't know.
I didn't mind the acting. I said it was about average for Are You Afraid of the Dark episodes, but you're right. The fact that they're older, I don't know.
What is your name, princess?
Jennifer.
Good evening, Jennifer. I am Count Sean.
It should work better than it does, maybe.
Yeah, and I think part of it is the story. Like Sean, that the problem is that Sean is not given a lot to react to because he's always the one writing the story. So he doesn't really get anything to play off of. You're getting most of your scares and emoting from the other characters that are involved in the stories, and even then, like they're not great.
No, I think most of the acting. I think the biggest acting problems I think come from scripting issues, though. Some of the lines they're giving them are so hammy. Him explaining how the dream machine works to her within the dream is very like stilted and bizarre, and her reaction is. But I guess that's because it lives in a world where he's writing her reactions to these things too, right? It's very strange. Like the concept of it is strange because at what point does she become aware within the dream and have any sort of like personal accountability and control over what she's doing and saying, and how much of it is all his writing? You know what I mean?
Yeah, but I mean it has to be all his writing because that's how.
Right.
That was which again makes it even creepier because it's not creepy enough that he writes in that he kisses her.
It's the exact same thing. But then she kisses him back, which means he wrote that. Yep. Yeah,
and then
we're led to believe that she has some amount of consciousness within the dream, like she's experiencing the dream. So there'd be a part of her that is like, oh, I don't want to kiss him. Here I go. Like, oh no.
Yeah. Yeah, and then we're just supposed to expect that when she wakes up, she was completely okay with it.
Yeah. Maybe this episode is terrifying after all. That is deeply disturbing.
It's scary for the wrong reasons.
Completely. I gave the plot a 7 out of 10. I think it's decent. I like the concept of, because again, as a kid, how many times were you tasked with writing a 1-page story or something? And mine were all like that. Yeah, the scary, what is his name? Blind Paul? Like that kind of
Blind
stuff
Paul.
To me was all like, yeah, right. And in my mind, I'm picturing it. It's so good. And I like, but I'm sure they were all terrible. And I actually like I like the ending. I like the that they come up with. Will write that the typewriter never existed. Like it is a bit of a like rushed like, and then nothing happened and we erased the whole episode. But it works. Like it works within the context of the plot, I think.
That's one of those plots too, where anytime you're dealing with like time travel, because it's not time travel, but you are affecting time.
Yes.
Because he writes that the typewriter never existed, which means going back to like the secret cubby that they found and like the articles and stuff and like the properties behind this, that means that if everyone that disappeared never disappeared, which would alter the present.
Yeah.
And then like if you never did the things that were the result of the typewriter, would you even remember that you did those things? Like,
yeah, there's some butterfly effect happening here for sure.
Is it a Back to the Future effect? Like, does everybody that was affected remember that they were affected, but now they're not? Like, it's such, it makes you go cross-eyed. It's not good in that regard.
You can't overthink these.
Yeah, I gave it a 6. I think 6 for the plot.
I gave it a 7, which feels generous, but I'm going with whatever I gave them when I watched them. I'm trying not to adjust my numbers. 7 feels like a lot for me, but...
I gave the acting a 4.
Ooh, again, I gave the acting an 8, but I think that's because I'm adjusting against other episodes. And I felt like none of them... I liked Sean. I thought Sean was really good, actually. He's the, like, main guy, right?
Yeah. Count Sean, bro. Let's count Sean.
Again, he's not given a lot, but he's given challenging material because, like, how do you play any of those lines off without seeming like a total creep?
Can we talk about the fact that number one, he had one of the coolest bedrooms. Anytime you have a kid in a movie that has like an attic bedroom,
oh yeah,
it's awesome. But this guy. I don't remember our policy on language for these episodes, but he's got a fuck bedroom because he's got a clapper. He's got a clapper installed.
It is ridiculous. It is, and it's such a weird, specific moment. It's almost like it was product placement or something because it just comes out of nowhere. Yeah, very strange. Yeah, I gave the acting an 8. I regret it as I'm saying it, but I'm going to stick with it. The setting I gave a 5. I think the graveyard stuff was really well done. We don't see much of it. The setting is not the graveyard. That's like 1 minute of this episode. The dream sequences generally, I think, are interesting to look at. Even like the school dance and stuff, they're not scary, but I think they're well executed for like these brief moments. They really put a lot of like production into them, I think.
Yeah, I gave the setting a 6. I agree the cemetery / forest, because for whatever reason every cemetery they have on the show is in a forest. I think it looks good. Like I think they always nail it with those, but again, you're right, it's such a small part of the episode. And the school itself, yeah, there's nothing scary about it, but it's fine. Like
go ahead.
I was just gonna say there's like a couple of cool set pieces that could have been used better. I think like when they discovered the secret room, I think they could have spent more time there, learning about. They would have been better, I think, if they would have learned more. Like weird stuff started happening, and then they went back in there and started researching more, and then learned more about what was going on. But like that, I felt like that space was very poorly utilized, and so yeah, agreed. There was potential here. I don't know. I gave the scares a 1 on this one because there just was nothing there for me. I think I gave it a 1 because I liked the idea of a character named Blind Paul. And I hate that we never got to see more of that concept come to life in a more meaningful way, but there really was no scares in this. I gave it a 2 because I think there was, more, because I gave Locker 22 a 1. This to me, if I had to say it was scarier, it is scarier than Locker 22, so I gave it a 2. And to me, the truly scary part of this episode is the teacher.
Oh yeah.
And I went on a tirade about this.
Yeah.
It is the fact that she's shoveling her face in every scene. The toilet pastry? Are you kidding me? When she's in the bathroom stall with donuts or whatever and reading the story. I wanted to punch the actress. I wanted to punch the writer who wrote the story. Everything
and then
about
on
this
a treadmill, though.
Yes.
I didn't understand, is that a joke? I just did not understand why they made a character whose whole thing was being obese. Was it just a reason for her to have to leave her desk while reading? It had to have been.
I guess. Yeah, I have no idea, but I hated every part of that character and her presence in the store. I hated everything, all of it. There was such a better way to accomplish what they needed to accomplish without that character.
There was one moment where she puts a button on a scene by taking an aggressive bite of a donut, and there's a music cue with it where it's just like and it like cuts to a commercial break is so ridiculous. It's why I regret giving the acting a higher score than it probably deserves.
Well, the worst part is, like, she's not even doing a bad job. She's just playing what I call, like, the Joffrey effect from Game of Thrones, where, like, you hate that actor because he's so good at playing this despicable character.
Yes.
It's like there's some transference going on there. Yeah. I feel bad, but yeah, it's she does a fine job, but the character's just so despicable.
I shouldn't say all. 85% of the adults in Are You Afraid of the Dark are playing these insane, broad stereotypes, as we will see a couple episodes from now, that are just like they exist in a different world than the kids. And I wonder if that's like, what's the psychology there? Because it had to have been a discussion, like for people who write for this show, which I think they use the same kind of few writers. Mm-hmm. They've got to know, like, right, we want kids' perception of adults, which are these like, the principals have to be principals, and like the fat teacher has to be this goofy, like, maybe that's it. It's from the kid's perspective, so the adult world can be something that exists entirely separately than the kid world. Maybe.
I think you're onto something there, but again, it's because of that weird gear shift that we had in this season, where it does feel like it's meant for an older audience.
Yeah.
Whereas that mentality you think would apply more towards a younger audience, because I feel like as a younger child, you do, like, adults and stuff like that can seem scary. Whereas as a teenager, you're more at odds with adults rather than them seeming scary. You're just more like rebelling oftentimes against them. So it's weird. It's a mixed bag. I'm not sure.
The last little comment I had before we wrap that up is the amount of meet cutes they had. The two leads, they bump heads like 3 separate times in this episode. It's so infuriating, and it's so like they don't have any kind of palpable chemistry, so it just is like this hand-holding for the audience where we're told we should be rooting for them. Oh, I just found it so hard to get on board with. And it just doesn't work. It doesn't work in this show. Stop it.
Definitely not here, for sure.
Yeah. So my average was 5.25, which again feels way too high now that we're talking about it.
My average ended up being a 4.5, which is funny because I don't even think we mentioned, when we were talking about Locker 22, we didn't even mention that romantic interest in that story, because that was one of the first ones where, like, because they even like hug, and they hug for a long time in that episode at the end.
Yeah.
And
so that
and
is...
then they...
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, and then they kiss here, so it's like...
That's every episode except 13th Floor so far. So 4 out of 5 have had a romantic subplot. I mean...
And it's about to be 5 out of 6.
Yeah. The final wish, it's pretty, like, peripheral. They mentioned they have a crush, whatever, or the guy with the backwards hat and the tie. Yeah. But all the other ones, it is like a plot point. It's very strange. Good to move on?
I mean, I don't want to talk about this episode, but I'm good to move on.
We have shockingly different opinions this season, I will say. The Tale of the Dark Dragon, I believe, is next, correct?
Yes, it is.
If ever there was a heavy-handed metaphor for opioid addiction, I think it's The Tale of the Dark Dragon. What are your general thoughts?
I hate this episode.
Do you?
I do. And again, it may be a metaphor for that, for like drugs, but like the way the message is delivered doesn't, I don't know. It doesn't come across that way for me. Like, it's
right.
Because it's also dealing with, to me, I didn't read it as an opioid thing. I saw it as he was in this car accident and he's struggling with, like, he doesn't feel like himself anymore or whatever. And so to me, the message of the episode was like acceptance, like accepting that you are who you are and you're good enough kind of a thing. But like, I just felt like it's not executed right, because he doesn't reach the conclusion that it's okay to be who he is at the end. The conclusion is that his magic potion cured him all his ailments, and now he gets to be with his hot girlfriend. Like, that's how it ends. And I had just this huge issue with the way it was executed. Like, at the end of the episode, I was furious.
The tears.
And I don't often get like angry at episodes, but like this, I was just like, I don't like the message here. And I may be off on what that message was supposed to be. But it just, woo.
You feel some feelings about this episode.
I do.
I mean, I have to say I disagree only because my scores will tell you I disagree. I understand. I agree with everything you're saying. I think for me, I like the actor, and I think that the plot works because I think it is like for Are You Afraid of the Dark and for a Sardou episode, which normally I'm never on board with.
$40? $40. All right, 35. But I'm losing on the deal.
But I like the idea that this guy is desperate and he's just like the way he's led into it. He finally gets a shred of confidence, and then it turns on him, and then he's like, "Well, I'll just do a little bit more," and then it turns on him in a worse way, and it just becomes this thing that he can't escape from. And he likes this other persona he's able to take on until it gets to be too far. And I really actually liked the girl at the end overdoing it because her own desperation or whatever, like these two people who should be together, these two people who are whatever disadvantaged in the same ways. It's so horrendous, but you know what I mean? Like clearly they want us to want these, we're rooting for these two. This like beautiful actress they just put in a cardigan and we're meant to believe she's ugly. But I like the end where she takes it, she gets hideous, then he has to like, oh God, what have I done? I've led you to think this is the only thing that I'm interested in. You know, like I'm only going to like somebody who's as beautiful as me. That being said, the twist end with the tears being the antidote is like completely ridiculous. I don't know how else they could have ended it, but it was just other than like, oh, let's just both live as monsters. We're perfect for each other.
Yeah, it is one of those episodes where it feels kind of anticlimactic. Like the way that it ends with just the tear and then they're both better, but they're both hot and they both get to go back into the dance. Just it felt like nothing. It felt like nothing happened.
Yes. Yeah, you're right. Well, but are they both? They both return to normal, correct?
No, they both. Because like they go back into the dance at the end. He stands up. He's fine. He still looks the same as when he was attractive. She still looks the same as she was attractive. So like the idea is that they battled the dark dragon and came out as more attractive people at the end. Like to me, that was my problem with the episode. Is that like
it's really heroic.
It's just so many things. Like the girl, especially her. I felt so bad for this character because she just wants to be liked by this guy. She's doing all this stuff for him. And it's not until she's attractive at the dance where he's like, oh, hey. And then when she finds out that she took, and when she finds out she took the stuff and he's like, why did you do that? And she's like, because I wanted you to like me. And it's like, oh, you are too good for this guy.
Yeah.
But then they just end up together because of a magic tear. I
also love how quickly the hot girl rejects him at the dance as soon as her ex-boyfriend wins an award and dedicates it to. And she like looks at him like, "Sorry, I gotta go back."
I'm sorry, Casey.
Everyone in this episode is a piece of crap. Because think about the boyfriend, which also I'm going to point this out. I don't know if you feel the same way, but this is a David story, right? And he borrows Sardou, and remember, it's supposed to be a birthday gift, I think, for Gary. Think about the characters in this story. The jock that's kind of a jerk is named Gary, right? Your primary character in this story looks a lot like David. Like down to the actor looks a lot like David. And then you've got the hot girl in between that they want, who's clearly Kristen. I felt like this whole story is like David's way of being like, there ain't no love triangle, bro. I'm going to win her in the end. Like that's how it felt to me.
All of David's stories do have a grain of sadness to them. They're all like very real characters that have some like, it's not about ghosts. It's about like personal turmoil.
Which is funny because I think as a younger man, I probably very much identified with David being he was my favorite kind of stuff like that.
For sure, he was the way in for I think every male viewer of the show.
Like everyone in this story is deplorable. When the Gary character in the story gets up on stage, and he's like, keep in mind he brought a date, and then he's like, but I want my original date.
Yeah.
Will you have me? And I was like, wait, what about the girl you brought? Everyone
it's
is
awful.
horrible.
You're right. Oh, now I'm going to contradict myself hugely because I apparently rated this amazingly well. It struck me in a good mood. Plot-wise, I gave it an 8 out of 10. I like it. I think it's predictable, but I think they do well creating tension. I like the like mounting stakes of him taking this again and again, and I actually think, again, for Are You Afraid of the Dark, they pull off the makeup stuff. The progression of his deterioration, I think, goes pretty well. It reaches a point where it's like he's wearing this insane prosthetic mask thing. But like the thing that I will never get over is the tears being the cure. I think it's so insane. So I gave it an 8, which seems high still, but
I ended up giving the plot a 2.
Cool.
Again, I just did not like.
Oh boy.
I agree with you though on the like his transformation. That stuff I think was handled really well. Some of the best I think prosthetics of the season are utilized here, and I honestly think that's where part of it affected my opinion of the plot too. Is that I just thought we could have dealt with that more, with more of his transformation, and maybe him do it, because it doesn't. To me, the transformation doesn't really feel like it ever comes to a head at any point.
Yeah, he doesn't become an like irreparable monster at some point.
Yeah. Like I thought that would have been like if he had gone and actually done something in this way. Like if not only had it affected him physically, but also maybe emotionally as well, and caused him to like rage out on something. But we never get that. So to me, I don't know. The plot just did nothing for me.
Also,
I did give
Sorry, now that you say that, the fact that the potion has a cumulative effect and she drinks the whole thing, wouldn't it have been funnier if she walks in and she's fully like a supermodel from the 90s, like a runway supermodel? She's all of a sudden blonde and like 7 feet tall.
Just like those the old milk commercials,
right?
Where like a child and then they're full on supermodel. She's just a different actress
I would
altogether.
have loved that, and they're all just like, "What the hell? What happened?" Sorry, you were going to say about the acting, I believe.
Oh yeah, I gave it a 7 because I actually think the acting was really solid here.
Agreed. I gave it an 8. Yeah, I think it's really strong. I think they're both really good. As deplorable as they all are, I think they all kind of pull it off. And there's not enough Sardo for it to be completely derailed for me. So
yeah, there's like one scene, two scenes, right? Just 2 scenes with him.
Yeah,
I think it's very manageable if you're not a Sardo fan.
Yeah, for a high school setting, mostly, I gave it a 6. There's nothing really exciting. But I feel like they did enough leaving that setting, enough stuff at his house, enough stuff at it was still interesting to me. It read a little bit more like I don't know, not an after school special. It read like a Degrassi episode or something where there were just like more locations to at least maintain interest.
Yeah.
What did you think? I
give it a 5. For me, it was just kind of middle of the road. There's nothing bad about any of the settings, but also nothing that really lent itself to being scary. But again, the episode itself isn't really that scary, so it's not. Yeah, I didn't find it offensive in any way or anything.
And yet, I gave it an 8 for scares. I think this goes back to, and I know we've disagreed on this, I think what's rare in these episodes is effective ramping up of tension. And I think it does it well here, where like we know what he's doing is not good for him, and he keeps doing it. It starts with the rabbit, right? They introduce it with the drops on the rabbit in the store, and then he walks away and the rabbit starts smoking and pulsing and turns into this creature. I wish they hadn't shown the creature, first of all. It should have just been like a puff of smoke and we're like, oh, this might not go well.
Yeah, I feel like you just heard like the noises or something like that.
Yeah, but I like the ramping of it up. I like it up and up and up. We think what's going to happen is he's going to take the whole bottle and turn into some monster that will never turn back. But instead she takes it. And I think that's like a really interesting and effective like progression of the story and ramping up of the story, that this girl that we as an audience I think care about and sympathize with and seems genuine and sweet now is put in danger because of this guy's selfishness and you know, I don't know what the word I'm trying to say, like being superficial and stuff. Now it's reached her as well. 8 seems high. I have a feeling yours might be a 2 or a 3.
It's actually not that low. I gave it a 4 because, again, this is when I was talking about like trying to balance whether I consider like makeup effects as part of the scares. Again, I do think the makeup was really good. I just don't think they do anything with it to make it like the makeup doesn't lend itself to the scares. I think the makeup is scary, but they don't do anything with it in the episode. And again, with the weak ending, the scares aren't really all that there for me. So I gave it a 4.
I think what happened this season for me is because there are so few scares, I started translating the scare ranking into like general tension. Because there are really in many of these episodes, there's maybe like 1 or 2 parts where I was really like, oh, like taken aback. But I mean, it's really few and far between. So I think I'm being overly generous with the scares this season. My average for the episode is 7.5.
Okay. Mine ended up being a 4.5.
It's interesting because I feel like a few of these, this season in particular, must have just hit at a time where I started watching the show or started appreciating the show, because I think I have some nostalgia for some of these episodes, and that it might like skew, because even talking about them now is like, yeah, the plot's not that great, and I gave it an 8. And I stand by it, damn it.
Well, and that's one of the things I enjoy about getting to talk about these things with you is seeing things from a different perspective, because obviously, and this goes for anyone watching the video too, like these are just our opinions. We're not, if you love an episode that we don't like or vice versa, we're not saying you're wrong for liking it. Like there's just different opinions. And so like when you mentioned the metaphor for drug thing, like now I can like look at this episode and try to like see it with a different perspective. You know what I mean? Because I just saw it as like a vanity thing. You know what I mean? So is that going to change my rating? Probably not. But again, it's a different perspective, and I like getting to look at an episode with a different perspective. So
yeah, agreed. No, if anyone's rating should change, I think we can both agree that it's mine.
Thanks so much for tuning in to part 1 of our annual Are You Afraid of the Dark summary review for season 2. This one was so long we had to split it into 2 parts, so stay tuned tomorrow for part 2.